The gate was open, but nobody moved through it. 6 neighbors stood at the fence line of the old Callahan place outside Uvalde County, Texas, in the second week of September, saying nothing. Behind them, the county was the color of a paper bag, brown grass, cracked stock tanks, culverts that hadn't seen water in 11 weeks. But past this particular fence, the ground was green. 28 cattle stood grazing, heavy-flanked and calm, in a pasture that should not have existed. Walt Pruitt, who had run cattle in this county for 39 years, took his hat off and just looked. But to understand what they were seeing, you have to go back 14 months, to the day Daniel Reyes did something everyone in the county said was a mistake. Sometimes the thing everyone calls foolish is just a plan nobody has seen finished yet. Subscribe for more true stories like this, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Daniel Reyes was 34, a former diesel mechanic who had inherited 81 acres from an uncle who died still owing 4 years of back taxes. The land had been leased out and overgrazed for a decade. His wife, Clara Reyes, had a degree in range science she'd never gotten to use, working a desk job in San Antonio instead. Daniel knew engines. Clara knew grass. Neither of them had run a cattle operation before. 3 weeks after the funeral, sitting at the kitchen table with the tax bill between them, Clara said something Daniel barely registered at the time. Thin cattle aren't broken. They're just waiting to be fed right. She meant it about a spreadsheet. He didn't understand yet that she meant it about everything. Clara had studied a method most ranchers in the county dismissed outright, high-density rotational grazing. Moving cattle through small paddocks every 1 to 2 days instead of letting them roam one big pasture all season. The method traced back to research popularized in the 1960s by range ecologists studying how wild herds of bison had once grazed North American grasslands, dense, fast-moving, and gone before the land could be damaged. Studies since then have shown that short, intense grazing followed by long rest periods could increase forage root depth and improve a pasture's drought resilience within a single growing season. Daniel didn't announce the plan to anyone. He built cheap electric cross-fencing out of scrap wire from his mechanic days and started moving 40 head of thin, drought-cold cattle, bought for $1,100 a head. Half the going rate, through half-acre paddocks, one section at a time. Walt Pruitt drove out in March, boots dusty, and looked at the cattle a long moment. Those are Callahan's old bones, Daniel. Skinny stock on a beat pasture. That's a hard way to lose a summer. Maybe, Daniel said. We'll see in August. By April, people at the feed store were calling the place the boneyard. Daniel heard it. He didn't argue. It kept moving fence. In late May, alone before sunrise, Daniel walked a paddock the cattle had rested for 18 days. The grass came up past his bootlaces, thicker than any section on the property. He knelt and pulled one plant, the roots ran deep, pale, and long. He didn't call Clara. He didn't tell Walt. It just stood there a long moment, then went back to work. By July, the drought that had been building across South Texas for 2 years tightened into the worst dry spell the county had recorded in 4 decades. Stock tanks on neighboring ranches dropped by half. De Reyes, loan officer at the county bank, called twice in 1 week about the note still owed on the land. 3 smaller crises stacked up fast. The well pump on the north paddock burned out in the second week of July, and Daniel spent a sleepless night rebuilding it with parts scavenged from his old truck. A rumor moved through town that the Reyeses were down to feeding hay they couldn't afford, which wasn't true, but Daniel heard it secondhand at the gas station and said nothing. Then, in early August, 11 cattle broke through a weakened cross-fence during a night storm and scattered across 2 neighboring properties, and it took until dawn to gather them all back. Standing in the dark that night, counting fence posts by flashlight, Daniel doubted himself for the first time. He thought about the tax debt, the interest, the $1,100 a head. Clara found him there near 4 in the morning. The grass is still there in the morning. So are we, she said. Through all of it, the rotational paddocks held. While the county's set stock pastures turned to dust, the Reyeses, rested paddocks kept a thin cushion of green at the root line. And the cattle, thin when bought, began putting on weight the neighbors couldn't explain. In the last week of August, Walt Pruitt showed up at the gate without calling first, an hour before dark, carrying a spare fence charger in his truck bed. So your posts were running low on juice, he said. Figured you could use this. He didn't apologize. It didn't need to. Daniel took the charger and shook his hand. Appreciate it, Walt. Don't get used to me showing up, Walt said, and helped him wire it in anyway. By mid-September, 3 neighboring ranchers had stopped by the fence line asking questions instead of laughing at the nickname. One brought a notebook. Another asked Clara for the name of the extension office paper she'd read years ago. At the feed store, the conversation about the boneyard had quietly changed from a joke into a question: how'd they do that on 81 acres in a drought like this? What looked worthless in March, thin cattle, tired ground, a nickname meant to sting, was never actually broken. It was only waiting for someone patient enough to understand what it needed. Clara had said it once at a kitchen table about a column of numbers, never guessing it would become the truest thing either of them believed by the end of that summer: thin cattle aren't broken. They're just waiting to be fed right. The same was true of the land, and maybe of the two of them. If this reminded you that being right sometimes just takes longer than being loud, leave a comment below. Subscribe for more stories about people who were right before anyone else believed them.